Ladies and gentlemen, friends, fellow seekers, good evening. I want to talk to you tonight about one of the most radical, transformative, and quietly subversive acts a human being can undertake in the 21st century. It requires no special equipment, no subscription fee, and yet it offers access to infinite universes. It is the simple, profound act of reading a book. And more specifically, I want to tell you what happened when I made a pact with myself to read just one book every single month. A few years ago, I realized my mind was living on a diet of snippets, scrolling headlines, skimming emails, absorbing the relentless, fragmented digital stream. My attention span felt shattered, my thoughts reactive, my inner world crowded yet strangely empty. So I set a modest goal, one book per month, 12 books a year. It seemed almost laughably small. But let me tell you, that gentle consistency didn't just change my reading list. It began to rewire my brain and reshape the very lens through which I see our world. First, let's talk about what happens inside the skull. Picking up a book is not a passive act. It is a full-brain gymnasium. When you read a novel, for instance, and you step into the shoes of a character navigating a complex moral dilemma, something miraculous occurs. Neuroscientists using fMRI scans have seen it. Not only do the language processing centers of your brain light up, but so do the regions associated with physical movement, sensory experience, and emotional processing. If a character runs, your motor cortex stirs. If they touch silk, your sensory cortex responds. You are not just decoding symbols, you are simulating reality. You are building synapse by synapse, what psychologists' theory of mind. The ability to understand that others have beliefs, desires, and perspectives different from your own. Reading one book a month is a monthly boot camp for empathy, and it's a frontal lobe workout. Following an intricate plot, remembering a cast of characters, comprehending complex arguments, this strengthens our neural pathways for concentration, critical analysis, and memory. In a world designed to distract, the sustained, linear focus required by a book is a form of cognitive resistance. It builds what I call attention capital. You stop being a leaf blown by the winds of notification, and you become the gardener of your own mind. But the impact goes far beyond mere neuroscience. This is where the true magic begins, the shift in vision. Reading one book a month means you are in a constant, rotating dialogue with the greatest minds, the most daring imaginations, and the most piercing observers of humanity who have ever lived. One month, you're in ancient Rome with Marcus Aurelius, pondering the nature of power and impermanence. The next, you're in the dusty American South with Harper Lee, seeing the profound injustice etched into a child's awakening. Then you're grappling with the future through Octavia Butler, or understanding power through Machiavelli, or feeling the ache of love through Pablo Neruda. This curated journey does something profound. It dissolves your temporal and cultural myopia. You realize with humbling force that your way of thinking, your society's norms, your moment in history, is just one flicker in a vast, roaring bonfire of human experience. The anxieties you think are unique, Seneca wrestled with them. The passions you feel, Sappho gave them voice. This monthly pilgrimage builds a profound intellectual humility. It whispers, you are not the center. Your truth is not the only truth. Consequently, your vision of the real world becomes multi-layered, like an augmented reality display. Walking down a street, you no longer just see bricks and asphalt. You might see the economic forces that shape the architecture. From last month's economics book, the social dynamics playing out on the corner. From that sociology text, or the hidden ecological web supporting that lone tree, from the naturalist's memoir. A news headline about a political crisis stops being a flat, confusing event. It becomes a chapter in a much longer story about human tribalism, resource scarcity, or the psychology of leadership, themes you've seen play out in a dozen different genres. This practice also inoculates you against the tyranny of the present. Our digital ecosystem thrives on the now, the urgent, the instantly reactive. A book is an island of deep time. It forces you to slow down, to consider cause and effect, to see the long arc. You begin to recognize cycles. You see the same human dramas, the quest for love, meaning justice playing out on different stages. This gives you a calmer, more measured perspective. The crisis of the day begins to feel like a scene in a play whose broader acts you are starting to understand. Finally, and perhaps most personally, this rhythm of reading built a sanctuary within me. In the space of those monthly volumes, I found not escape, but engagement of a deeper kind. I found solace in knowing others have felt my deepest despairs and my most inexpressible joys. It made me feel less alone. It also made me more comfortable with complexity. Books rarely offer easy answers. They live in the gray areas, in the conflicting motivations of a flawed character, in the unresolved tension of a great essay. This taught me to resist binary thinking, to hold multiple, contradictory ideas in my mind at once, a skill desperately needed in our polarized world. So, what happened when I had one book a month? My brain became sharper, more focused, more empathetic. My vision of the world became deeper, wider, and richer with context. My inner life became a crowded library of voices instead of a lonely, echoing hall. I am not suggesting you must become a speeder or a literary scholar. I am advocating for the steady drip, the consistent conversation. One book a month. It is a commitment of about 15-20 minutes a day. It is less time than we spend scrolling through a single social media feed in an evening. In that modest investment, you claim your cognitive sovereignty. You step off the hamster wheel of the present and join the great, timeless human conversation. You rebuild your attention, you fortify your empathy, and you gift yourself the ultimate superpower, the ability to see the world not just as it is presented to you, but as it has been, as it could be, and as it is felt in the infinite landscapes of the human heart. Pick a book, just one, and let the quiet revolutionary transformation begin. Let us imagine, with empathy and without judgment, the inner landscape of a person who has not opened a book in 20 years. This is not necessarily a person who cannot read, but one for whom the sustained, deep, linear engagement of a book has been replaced by other inputs. The result is not a simple lack of information, but a profound reshaping of cognition and perception. The cognitive habitat, a prairie of short grass. First, consider the brain's environment. For 2 decades, it has primarily been fed information in short, fast, interchangeable bursts, social media snippets, video clips, and transient conversations. The neurological pathways for sustained focus begin to atrophy from disuse. The attention muscle, built for following a 300-page narrative or a complex argument, weakens. The person may find it physically uncomfortable to sit with a single, unstimulating thread of thought for more than a few minutes. The mind, accustomed to rapid-fire rewards, likes, notifications, swipes, grows restless and impatient with delayed gratification. Contemplative thinking, the kind that requires wrestling with an idea over chapters, becomes a foreign, strenuous activity. The worldview, a mosaic of fragments, not a narrative. Their understanding of the world is likely assembled from a mosaic of fragments, headlines, sound bites, memes, and anecdotes. This creates a vision of reality that is wide but shallow. They may be aware of many topics, but lack the context and foundational knowledge to understand their roots or interconnectivity. Complex issues, climate change, geopolitical conflicts, economic shifts, are reduced to simplistic binaries or emotional triggers. Without the long-form analysis, historical parallels, and nuanced character studies that books provide, their sense of cause and effect becomes shortened to immediate, personal, or tribal terms. The empathy muscle, possibly atrophied. While life experiences and other media like great films can foster empathy, books offer a unique, unmediated gateway into the interiority of another consciousness. Without this regular practice of literary empathy, of spending hours inside the mind of someone profoundly different from yourself, the ability to mentally and emotionally inhabit a complex other may diminish. The world can become more populated by caricatures and categories, political, social, cultural, and less by nuanced, contradictory human beings. The person might be more prone to stereotyping, as they have not voluntarily and consistently challenged their own perspective through immersive, first-person narrative. Language and thought, a shrinking universe. Language is not just a tool for communication. It is the architecture of thought. A diet devoid of rich, varied, and precise written language can lead to a shrinking of one's internal vocabulary. As George Orwell warned in 1984, a reduced vocabulary leads to a reduced capacity for thought. Complex emotions become harder to identify and articulate. Arguments become more reliant on cliché, dogma, or emotional emphasis rather than structured logic and original expression. The internal monologue itself may become more reactive, less reflective. The sense of time, the perpetual now. Books root us in deep time, past, present, and future. They connect us to centuries of thought and project into imagined futures. Without this anchor, a person can become untethered, living more exclusively in the perpetual present of the digital stream. History becomes a vague backdrop, a handful of oversimplified facts, devoid of texture and lesson. The future becomes an abstract source of anxiety rather than a space for informed imagination or planning. This can foster a sense of helplessness or passive cynicism as the long arc of human struggle and progress becomes invisible. But it is not all loss, adaptation, and strength. This is not to say this person is lesser. The human brain is phenomenally adaptive. For 20 years, theirs has become supremely optimized for other, potentially valuable, 21st century skills. Skill at scanning vast amounts of information quickly for relevance. Multitasking prowess in dynamic, fast-paced environments. Social and visual literacy in digital spaces. A strong sense of cultural immediacy and current trends. They may be highly functional, successful, and socially intelligent. The trade-off is not in intelligence, but in a specific kind of cognitive depth. They live on the bustling, vibrant surface of the information ocean, but have lost the habit, and perhaps the tools, for diving deep to see the mysterious, complex, and beautiful ecosystems that thrive in the quiet darkness below. The door is never locked. The most crucial thing to understand is that this state is not permanent. The neuroplasticity of the brain means the pathways for deep reading can be rebuilt. Picking up that first book after 20 years would be challenging. The mind would wander. It would feel like a strenuous mental hike after a long period of riding on scooters. But with persistence, the dormant muscles would reawaken. The sudden immersion into a deep, coherent, alternate world could be shocking, even overwhelming, in its richness. It might feel like stepping out of a noisy, crowded, fluorescent-lit room into a vast, quiet, star-filled night. The person who hasn't opened a book in 20 years is, in a way, a reflection of our age. Hyperconnected yet context-deprived, informed yet unwise, fluent in communication, but sometimes impoverished in thought. Their experience is a testament not to failure, but to adaptation to an environment that no longer demands, and often actively disrupts, the slow, sacred, and deeply human act of reading deeply. A beautifully organized home without a bookshelf is not just a design choice. It is a philosophical statement, a portrait of a particular modern existence. Let's unpack what it means. On the surface, the aesthetics of absence. Visually, it represents the pinnacle of a certain minimalist, curated ideal. It speaks of control, clarity, and intentionality. Every object has a designated place, chosen for its form, function, or contribution to a serene atmosphere. It is a home designed to be a sanctuary from clutter, both physical and mental. The absence of bookshelves eliminates the visual noise of varied spines, the weight of unread pages, the faint dust of paper. It is clean, tranquil, and supremely photogenic. It whispers, enough, the implied lifestyle, the digital native, and the experientialist. This is where the silence of the missing bookshelf grows loud. It values the present and future over the past. A bookshelf is a personal history. It holds the ghost of who you were when you bought that novel, the textbook from your college passion, the gift from a lost friend. A home without one is a home less anchored in its own narrative. It is a home that lives firmly in the now. It prioritizes utility and aesthetics over intellectual accretion. The items present are likely either useful, the perfect ceramic vase, or beautiful, the sculptural chair. There is little room for the messy, ongoing, unfinished project of a curious mind. A bookshelf is often a working laboratory of thought, half-read books, revisited favorites, aspirational volumes. Its absence suggests a tidier, more resolved intellectual life. It subtly severs a tangible link to collective human wisdom. A bookshelf, even with just a few beloved books, is a handshake with other minds across time and space. Its absence means that connection, if it exists, is entirely virtual and invisible. The home's walls do not literally hold ideas, they only reflect light. The potential paradox, a temple without an altar. A beautifully organized home is often a place of peace, a personal temple. But a temple, historically, contains an altar, a focal point for what is revered, for contemplation of something larger than the self. For many, a bookshelf serves that purpose. It is an altar to curiosity, to knowledge, to story, to the long human conversation. Therefore, a beautiful home without a bookshelf risks becoming a temple dedicated solely to the values of order, calm, and aesthetic harmony. It is a sanctuary from chaos, but not necessarily an incubator for thought. It protects you from the world's noise, but may not as actively challenge or nourish your inner world with sustained, complex ideas. Ultimately, it is not a condemnation, but a definition. It tells us that in this specific haven the owners have chosen to externalize their inner life entirely, or to satisfy it through purely digital or experiential means. The home's beauty is its own end. It asks nothing of you but to appreciate its stillness.